Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Adopting AI, Putting the Pieces Together. I'm Abby Lundberg. I'm a business technology researcher and writer and president of Lundberg Media. I'll be moderating today's discussion. This webinar is the fourth and final installment of our series on adopting AI. In the first three episodes, we shared expert advice on picking the right problems to solve with AI and assessing both business and technical readiness to launch AI initiatives. Today, we'll discuss what it takes to move forward with AI today while also preparing for tomorrow. We'll cover how to execute an adaptive and resilient AI strategy in delivering data and analytics as a service. Our speakers will share emerging AI trends and use cases across a range of industries, with a special deep dive into the use of AI in healthcare, which of course affects us all. Kimberly Nevala will start things off. Kimberly is a strategic advisor at SAS and an expert in the areas of advanced analytics, information governance, and data-driven culture. She helps clients understand both the strategic value and the practical realities of artificial intelligence and digital transformation. Kimberly will be followed by Beena Ammanath, Executive Director of the Deloitte AI Institute and founder of Humans for AI. Beena is an award-winning senior executive with extensive global experience in AI and digital transformation. She helps organizations envision and architect how data, AI, and technology in general can make our world a better, easier place to live for all humans. Chris Donovan is Executive Director of Enterprise Information Management and Analytics at the Cleveland Clinic. Chris joined the clinic in 1992. Over the years, his work has focused on healthcare financial performance management, decision support, and analytics. In his current role, Chris enables the Cleveland Clinic system to acquire, manage, and use information in the transition to a value-based healthcare model. Welcome to all of you. Kimberly, I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, thank you, Abby. Welcome, everyone. So as you probably know and will continue to hear, delivering sustained value with artificial intelligence requires us to confront what can often feel like competing forces, such as the need to balance anticipation with actual impact. Now, we've made incredible strides in improving overall understanding and general literacy about artificial intelligence. But there is still a fairly large gap between what people expect these solutions to do and how they operate in real life. And this is complicated by the fact, in a lot of cases, we are still actively researching and learning how these solutions work as we put them to work. So managing expectations and figuring out how to deliver value today, while also leaving room to adopt and adapt as new capabilities come about, is going to be crucial. Now, we also need to address the need and desire for agility with the need for infrastructure. As you're going to hear, it's predicted that artificial intelligence is going to infuse every aspect of our businesses in the not so distant future, i.e. very, very soon. So learning how to address the needs of very diverse user bases, from executives to data scientists, while also efficiently managing the smorgasbord of data and analytics and algorithms and deployment methods that are available, is a critical challenge. We really have to invest in developing business and technical architectures that are flexible and nimble and resilient, but that don't sacrifice the governance and structure required to ensure the AI environment doesn't devolve into chaos. Now, last but not least, we need to ensure that our organization's understanding and ability to actually deploy and consume artificial intelligence solutions develops in lockstep with our intended outcomes and applications. So a poorly conceived AI solution that behaves badly or disenfranchises a vulnerable population, that was a tongue twister, or one that's not adopted because it's not understood, or it's feared, or simply because the system's objectives are not in alignment with human incentives, are all for naught. Now, Clearly, managing these tensions is not a new thing, but artificial intelligence is raising the stakes on these elements. So to help us think through how to address that, Beena is going to talk to you about emerging applications for artificial intelligence. And Chris is going to tell us how the Cleveland Clinic is rising to the challenge to deliver value from AI both today and tomorrow. So over to you, Beena.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was a great level setting and introduction. So Gartner recently stated that AI augmentation will reach 4.7 trillion in business value by 2024. So in the next 10 years, we can expect that access to infrastructure, speed of computing will allow organizations to scale AI like never before. Massive data sets in a variety of mediums will generate a more connected world and more connected customer. Sophisticated AI technologies that will be combined to bring innovative solutions to organizations and their customers. But what will this really look like? What is the value that can be created over the next 10 years? Let's look a little bit deeper. We believe that AI will enable businesses to achieve value across 6 key dimensions. Speed to execution. Businesses are looking for ways to apply AI to accelerate operational and business activities, resulting in minimizing latency throughout their organizations. 2, cost reduction. While organizations are accelerating, what they're doing is by intelligently automating business processes, tasks, and interactions to reduce the cost, increase efficiency, and ensure predictability across their front office and back office. Reduced complexity. Companies are leveraging AI to improve their understanding of their customers. We all have certainly experienced more personalized treatment as when we are consumers. So they're looking at personalizing the experiences for their customers and also their products, enhancing decision-making capabilities by deciphering patterns, connecting the dots, and predicting outcomes from increasingly complex sources of data. The AI itself is helping to reduce complexities. Number 4, transformed engagement. AI will figure out new ways to engage customers, suppliers, vendors. When we talk about digital engagement, the heart and core of digital engagement is cloud-enabled and AI-powered. You can only transform how you're engaging with customers if you study the data that tells you what they want, what they need, and how they want to interact with your organization and your products. Number 5 is fuel innovation. AI will help draw inferences on new products and services that could be offered in the marketplace, both as offensive and defensive strategies by companies, generating deep insights on where to play and how to win, enabling the creation of new products, market opportunities, and business models. We have certainly seen this happening in the past decade or so. And number 6, which I personally believe is one of the most crucial factor, fortified trust. Finally, AI will bring fortified trust. Fortified trust is not just thinking about cyber for protection, but blending it with AI so you can sense and scout threats to be proactive to prevent cyber episodes before they happen, effectively creating and fortifying trust with clients. AI can enable businesses to achieve value across each of these different dimensions and levers. But the question on everyone's mind is, how is the market tracking against this transformation? Are organizations and society really transforming? So every year for the last 4 years, we conduct our State of AI research and study, which engages 10 countries and over 300 clients and over 2,000 executive interviews across the world. 2/3 of the 300 plus clients said categorically that AI gives them a competitive edge today. This was substantiated by the fact that over 50% have increased their capital budget for AI initiatives by 4x more than last year. And 3/4 these organizations are integrating AI into every enterprise application that they take on. AI is no longer an afterthought. Lastly, 3/4 of the C-suite said they absolutely agree that AI will transform their organization. So these are pretty compelling numbers out here. So, and it is clear that organizations are viewing AI as a transformative play, embedded in business thinking, business processes, strategy, and these organizations are creating the capital spend to transform their business today. We're seeing examples of these types of transformation across every industry every day. And let me give you some examples. As you can see on the chart, food companies are adding AI to their recipes. Entertainment companies are using AI to predict movie success. Oil and gas companies are turning to AI to optimize their value chain and reduce costs. And once we all start flying again, I'll appreciate an airline that's using AI to help operations run more smoothly in bad weather and prevent unplanned downtime of their engines. These are just a handful of examples we are seeing today. But now let me talk about what lies ahead. As I mentioned previously, Gartner is predicting that AI augmentation will reach $4.7 trillion by 2024. But where and how? In order to be successful today, organizations need to imagine what tomorrow will look like. And tomorrow, AI will be everywhere, even more than what we're seeing today. Imagine a call center agent that knows why you're calling before you call. Imagine a full supply chain process that manages and adjusts on its own. Imagine cosmetics created and customized just for you and your skin alone. Imagine the AI boardroom, interpreting data, predicting and proposing ideas for their organization's future strategy. These are all possible. And while they may sound a bit futuristic today, with the pace of change that we're seeing in the market, this will soon be our reality, tangible, and no longer an imagination. With that, let me hand over to Chris to deep dive a little bit into how we are addressing this in healthcare.
Thank you, Beena. I thought I would start with just a quick introduction of the Cleveland Clinic. We are a global health system anchored in Northeast Ohio, where our main campus and 11 regional hospitals are located. You can see our tripartite mission statement on the left here, and we orient all of our strategic efforts around that mission. We have over 4,500 physicians and scientists, saw more than 2.4 million unique patients, and performed over 250,000 surgeries and procedures in 2019. We're home to the Lerner Research Institute, where we have over 2,500 active research projects. And as part of our teaching mission, we have almost 2,000 residents and fellows that are part of our clinical education programs. You can see our enterprise analytics purpose on the right here. And we believe we can draw a direct line between our analytics efforts and that organizational mission. Our EA purpose statement has several key components, and we try to be very thoughtful about the words we used here. The first is all caregivers. You know, the idea is that we have centralized analytics assets with distributed capabilities. So it's not about bringing it into a small group of people that can do this work. It's about enabling the organization. Appropriate access, so ensuring that we honor our mission and our responsibility to act as stewards of the important patient data that we hold. Trusted data, so knowing that our data has to be well governed, well understood, and fit for purpose. And finally, capability. You know, we must ensure that we're able to leverage these emerging methodologies to make better decisions. You know, the insight is really useless without activation. Next slide, please. So healthcare really is an industry in the midst of enormous transition right now in the United States. We're asking pretty fundamental questions at the national level about our delivery and payment mechanisms. We're seeing a massive shift from commercial to government payers as baby boomers continue to age into Medicare programs. And we're seeing a lot of new entrants into the healthcare space. We spend already about 18% of our GDP on healthcare in the United States, which is a pretty big portion of our economy. And so obviously there are important questions about how do we manage that and curb that growth going forward. We're generating an enormous amount of new data with EMRs, medical devices, personal health monitors, and we have a highly fragmented provider market in the US. That all adds up to perceived and actual opportunity to drive consolidation, bring efficiency into the marketplace, and we're seeing the results of that in many ways. Disruptive partnerships, big investment in this space. We're bringing new players into the market. And on top of all that, there's this kind of pervasive excitement and energy around AI and analytics that's adding to the mix and really creating a lot of energy in this industry. Beena talked about Deloitte's findings regarding the huge potential of AI across all industries, and that is certainly true for healthcare. We have an opportunity right now to revolutionize really the entire healthcare spectrum, from how we research disease and generate discovery to the entire care delivery process. We're exploring opportunities to focus on preventative medicine and population health, which is a major change for healthcare delivery in the United States. We want to incorporate virtual and digital health experiences, which we're already seeing in many other industries and are coming to be the norm and the expectation for our patients. We want to transform delivery of care from the exam room and the outpatient setting all the way through to our acute care and post-acute care delivery. And while the opportunity for benefits in this space is just huge, we really have to be careful to do this right in healthcare. There's an equally large opportunity for harm if we don't develop and apply a thoughtful approach to how best to use these tools and approaches in healthcare. Next slide. So the improvements and opportunity that I talk about that are presented by AI are really happening within the larger framework of an overall digital transformation in the healthcare industry. As we think about the opportunity that I referenced to move from reactive acute care medicine to well care and population health management, it means providers are going to have to build new capabilities. We're going to have to more deeply understand how to care for a population as a whole, as opposed to caring for individual patients as they present. And we have to extend our thinking beyond making you better when you get sick to keeping you well. And that means incorporating social determinants of health and how to address a broad range of issues and opportunities that are contributory to wellness. For instance, as we look at caring for a community, how do we incorporate data about the availability of grocery stores and healthy food in that space? How do we understand the challenges or the opportunities presented by the public transportation network for people to get to their healthcare providers? Do we have broadband access, broadband internet access in that community to enable some of the digital ways we want to connect with our patients? These are all going to drive differentiated health opportunities and outcomes, and should shape our approach to delivering the right care in the right mode at the right location. We have to understand how to forecast and manage financial risk in new ways as we enter into new payment methodologies. And we have to be able to capture, interpret, and integrate all this new kind of data with our existing and emerging clinical information stores. As we begin to implement the insights generated by AI and other analytic techniques, where and when do we present that information within the clinical workflows to best inform the clinical decision process? We have to remember in healthcare, this transition and this transformation is just as big for our providers as it is for the patients to whom we hope to deliver this value. Next slide. So while our focus today is talking about AI, I do think it is important to remember that AI is really just the endpoint today on a continuum of capability. And not everything is necessarily best solved with just an AI methodology. We want to build a strategy that considers the entire analytic spectrum. So as we think about at the clinic, how do we deliver on the promise of AI? We think we need to deliver across this entire analytics maturity. It's not just an isolated standalone implementation of an AI model or technology at the very top. It's really delivering a seamless integrated capability across the spectrum, and then continue to evolve as we continue to extend this curve over time as new and emerging technologies and applications come down the pike. I think the best way to accomplish that is to really think of delivering this as a program as opposed to individual use cases or applications. I mean, to be clear, I really believe that a use case agile delivery method is the best way to execute, but it has to be done within the context of your larger program goals and your desired architectures. So how do we actually deliver on all this potential and promise? It starts with a comprehensive approach that delivers on more than just technology. This is one of the challenges we face in healthcare, I suspect in other industries as well, that with all of the excitement and energy around the possibility and the potential in AI, that it really can devolve into a technology. I just need to turn something on or buy a new approach or get into the cloud or whatever that turns into be. And I really think that to be successful in this space, you have to move all four of the domains you see here: data, people, process, and technology together. You know, the right data in the correct format that's accessible by the right people with the right skills, all coordinated by efficient and appropriate processes. So if you think back to our EA purpose, you can hear that echoed in that purpose. It really doesn't do us much good to deliver a fantastic model or result or insight if the people that we're delivering it to don't have the capability or the understanding how to use it to change a decision that they're making. So while each of these domains is unique and has their own challenges, they're also connected, and we have to deliver them together. Our vision at the clinic is that we want to deliver both data and AI as a service to our organization. So we want to create that distributed capability that meets our diverse users kind of where they are and enables them to meaningfully engage in the application of these new technologies. So as we think about how do we focus that specifically within AI, we've translated that for those four domains. You can kind of see that echoed here in our AI goals, the data, people, process, and technology, specifically for AI, so that it becomes an extension of our overarching analytics and data strategies. We want to build coordination and collaboration across our enterprise to accelerate and enable our ability to leverage these methodologies. We want to bring together people that are working closely, so build those communities of practice. So for instance, we don't really need to have 10 different groups all working on developing a model to identify sepsis for our inpatient population. They can all work on that problem, but we want to connect them and have them work on it together so we deliver the best possible solution. You know, the first four goals here echo the data, people, process, technology. We've also added a fifth that specifically calls out the need for us to be transparent and ensure that we apply these methodologies in a way that is in alignment with our Cleveland Clinic enterprise values. We feel that healthcare has a higher bar that we need to get over to ensure that we avoid inappropriate and potentially dangerous pitfalls that could be present in the application of AI, ensure that we're free from bias in the algorithms that we use, and that we're really driving and understanding how these are going to be applied in a clinical setting. I think there's a higher standard that we have to apply if we're going to use these things to make decisions, and certainly if we're going to use them to be directly involved in the clinical decision-making process. So as we think about how do we actually apply this in healthcare, next slide, please. We have a lot of places where we can potentially deliver value against this. So one of the examples that you have here is how we're applying this in our population health space. So this is a model that we've implemented that allows our care coordinators to identify patients most at risk of some sort of future adverse health event. So I mentioned this earlier, the idea that, you know, that the traditional approach in healthcare is that when you get sick or when something happens, you come in and we will take care of you and try to heal you and make you better. And this kind of model that you're seeing here is a good example of how we're trying to change that paradigm and say, can we look at a population of patients for whom we're caring and identify patients early on who are at risk of seeing an acute condition develop? So in this case, we're using cost as a proxy to help us understand that, because we can look back at high cost episodes in the past and patterns and patients and understand, do we see similar patterns emerging where we can reapply our care coordination efforts. So what it allows us to do is take our care coordinators, they can look at the patients and the list of patients for whom they're responsible, and we can use this to help prioritize how they might reach out and connect folks to preventative care. And in that case, really keeping them from getting to that bad health outcome, which really lowers the cost of care delivery while also improving health outcomes. And that really is how we deliver on our Cleveland Clinic mission for caring for life, researching health, and educating those who serve. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Abby.
Great. Well, thank you all. That was a terrific presentation and a great setup for these wonderful questions we're getting in from the audience. We actually got a lot of questions around the ethical aspects. So why don't we start with that? You know, in general, a question would be, how is the conversation about ethics evolving, and where are people getting hung up? But I'll give you a couple of the specific questions too, and you can sort of weave that in. So Robert has this question for Beena. I would be interested in your reflections on how best to assess the ethical posture of existing algorithms and how to build them while being aware of cultural differences across cultures.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm very passionate about ethics. I am a technologist by training, but as I have been on this journey, I realized we need to figure out ethics to be successful and to reach the full potential of AI. We need to solve and think about ethics upfront. The good news is, in the past few years, what I've seen is that conversation has become more and more relevant and timely, and it comes on early in the discussion. It's no longer just about what are all the insights we can get, and how do you create value from data and use AI. It's also about what are the ethical implications that we should consider. So I am personally very optimized by the advances I've seen happening in leadership to have that conversation early on. And the few things that I would point out is, there's obviously a lot of hype around it. There are a lot of catchy headlines that you see around ethics. And there is also not as much focus on the solutions, but having the conversations early on and for us to kind of figure out the solution. And to Robert's point, there is, here is a statement that I always make. We tend to think about ethics. I'll make 2 points. One is, we tend to think about ethics in when you start an ethics conversation, it very quickly and rapidly goes down this rabbit hole of fairness and bias, right? And I think you have to be broader. The ethical implications can be different based on the industry and on the use case. For example, fairness and bias, like in a retail world, in the world that Chris lives in, absolutely important and to think about. But what are the ethical implications when you are thinking about predicting when a factory floor machine might fail? It is really just looking at factory data and trying to say, let's look at historical data and come up with predictions that we can put out to mitigate that unplanned downtime. Or an AI solution that's looking at predicting when a jet engine might fail to prevent unplanned downtime. The ethical implications there are more about safety, security, reliability of the algorithm. It's not about fairness and bias in that situation. So the first thing to consider is really get more nuanced and define what does ethics mean for a specific use case. The second point that I would make to Robert is really, it's a great question. I absolutely love it. Again, ethics is going to be different. The ethics principles are going to be different depending on the culture, depending on the geography of where the AI solution is used. It is not going to be a one size fits all. So we have to get beyond these headline and catchy titles to think about the nuances of ethics and solve for it at that nuance level. AI is very context specific. You could be using the exact same machine learning model in different scenarios and the outcomes driving different outcomes. In a similar way, ethical implications of an AI solutions are going to be very different based on the culture, the geography, based on who is using it, right? And we're certainly seeing that happening in the kind of thought that's being put into regulations and policies. And I think that's that next level that I'm excited about, moving from conversations on ethics to solutions. And the only way to get to solutions is to really have those nuanced discussions.
Terrific. And Chris, clearly this is a big issue in healthcare. In the time that you've been working with AI at the clinic, how have the conversations evolved around the ethical aspects?
Yeah, this is, like you said, this is a very high very high interest in healthcare. We think, you know, there's a couple of different places where this really manifests itself, and the two biggest ones are, like you talked about, bias and fairness. So can we ensure that a model that we might build that would lead us to a clinical intervention or a decision in our clinical process is unbiased, right? That's a really big deal to us. Are we treating our patients the same? Do we have the right data that allows us to draw the right conclusions about those patient populations and differentiate that when it's appropriate? I think the other conversation is around transparency. It is really challenging to attempt to change a clinical process or to implement the result of an algorithm into a clinical decision process if you don't understand why the algorithm is driving to that conclusion. That is very antithetical to, you know, the entire approach of evidence-based medicine. And so that's really a key factor for us too, is how do we understand why we're making a decision, why an algorithm is making a recommendation. And I think that's part of the reason why it's been a little bit slower to be implemented in healthcare as we start to develop methodologies to get more insight into that transparency, into the reasons why, and get a broader and better understanding of how to monitor, manage, and account for bias in our data that might result in bias in our outcomes. I think the other place where you're seeing this is, you know, healthcare in the United States on the provider side is an extremely fragmented, you know, industry. So we're you know, in that case, that means that even though we're considered a relatively large provider, our data sets are not really at a national scale. And so the opportunities that are arising now around data collaborations and connecting between providers and sharing information, I think is also going to accelerate our ability to leverage these, because the more data we get, the more diverse populations that are represented in those data, the better the algorithms and the models that we can get, and we can ensure that we're not seeing bias and all the things that I was talking about before. So yeah, I think this is a huge issue in healthcare of top concern for all of our leaders, and part of the reason why we're a little bit slower to the table than some other industries.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, as healthcare evolves into more of an ecosystem kind of model with payers, providers, different entities working more closely together, then you have to agree on what those guidelines are going to be and the approaches are going to be. One more question on the ethical stuff before we move on to some other things. The Javadi asks, who will be responsible for ethical compliance for the decisions driven by AI? Beena, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take a shot at it. So it's still evolving, right? There is no one playbook for, you know, either the AI technology solution or the C-suite leader who is responsible for it. I have seen a few different models. One is, you know, getting an AI ethics officer or a chief trust officer. And it's interesting, this question is so relevant because it's interesting where this role sits. Sometimes it reports directly to the CEO. Many times it's reporting to the chief legal officer or chief risk officer. And in a very few cases, it's at the CTO level. So, you know, hiring a chief AI ethics officer is becoming more common now, and especially in some industries. And the other option that I've seen that companies leverage is to set up this ethics advisory boards as we understand the nuances, right? You need to be plugged into academia and research. You need to be plugged to your peers within the industry and with regulators and policymakers. So bringing together an advisory board that can help and advise and guide the internal team as they think about ethical implications. And then the last one I've seen is really hiring an AI ethicist who's embedded within the engineering teams and helps drive some of those ethical decision making. So those are the three models I've seen, but would love to hear Chris and Kimberly's thoughts.
Yeah, I think in healthcare, what you will see, or what we're seeing emerging, is that we already have a pretty rigorous process on the research side around ethical applications, certainly of human studies, and we have institutional review boards, we have our compliance and safety officers, and I think that what we're doing is mirroring a lot of these approaches in the AI world on how we do that for research, because there's a lot of very similar questions. Is this the right thing to do? Is it the appropriate use of this data? what are our goals? Can we demonstrate that we're going to improve care, to accelerate discovery? And so I think you're going to see healthcare providers, certainly the academic medical centers, leverage that research side of the house for these kinds of implementations. And the other thing, just from an operational perspective, is really the whole, whatever you want to call it, ML ops or model management. How do you actually put those capabilities and technologies in place so that once we develop a model, we have a very rigorous process for watching that model, looking for degradation, understanding changes in the inputs that might be affecting our output. So I think for us, we're going to build that from that, like I said, that research side, and build on that foundation, and then really think about how we apply the operational management of these things.
Yeah, it sounds like a really multi-layered thing. Kimberly, what are you seeing with your clients, and what are you advising people to do?
Well, I was going to play on something Chris said as well, which is I think a lot of folks, AI is bringing some novel issues to the fore, but this idea of risk management, of managing liability, of dealing with even, financial services has a long and storied practice of external audits, right, around compliance in these components. So we don't necessarily have to start from scratch with all of these pieces. So the mechanism that Beena is talking about, whether it's an AI ethicist or a chief, AI officer, all augment that and bring in the specific domain expertise and those perspectives that maybe don't, haven't been there before. But I think the other thing is that as artificial intelligence is increasingly embedded into its ambient and part of your products and services, in the same way that somebody is responsible for that product and service today in terms of how it functions, in terms of its risk, in terms of its safety, we're not going to have separate accountability for the AI component from the product or the service, right? The product or the service owner will own the product or service, which will be inclusive of the artificial intelligence component, which again, it may just be so ambient embedded that it cannot be disintegrated, right? You don't get a chatbot without the AI component. And in the same way as we think about that, I think it's difficult to think about someone having accountability and responsibility for just the AI bit as opposed to the product and service. And this is important because when we go back to this ethics conversation, it is not just about the data or the algorithm being fair. How the solution is implemented and how the user engages with it can actually create ethical considerations, even if it's perfectly unbiased and somewhat safe. And Chris, you probably see this in the clinical realm, where depending on how a doctor understands and does or does not take the input or the recommendation into their decision making appropriately, right? It might actually be a suggestion. It might just be, or it's something that we really do want you to go and take a discrete action, can in fact completely change the profile and how that solution operates in real life. And it can create its own set of ethical and other concerns.
I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, and we have a few questions around learning and skills. So to start off, there's a question about how effective do you feel online MOOC AI certification programs are as a solution for building up an AI team, or do we really need employees with master's degrees or doctorates in AI-related disciplines to build an AI practice team?
So Chris, I think your Cleveland Clinic's done some really interesting work actually getting everybody involved. One of the places that I can't speak to MOOCs as deep data science training, I'll let Beena and maybe Beena speak to that aspect, but one of the things that we're seeing with some of these MOOCs, there's a course called Elements of AI, is they are very, very good at getting the non-traditional technologists into the mix of understanding the technology and being comfortable with them, even to a level of being able to get their hands on the technology. And we should be utilizing those a lot more with everybody, right? Ultimately, we want everybody to be conversant, and these kinds of courses are accessible and are increasingly targeted at, as Tamal Roos, who is the instructor for Elements of AI, hugely popular course. I think it's up to like 1 million users now. That course is targeted at people who don't know they're interested in AI. So I think that's one trend. But Chris, you guys have done some fascinating, I said some non-traditional ways to getting people into the fold.
Yeah, and we part of what drives our strategy in the people space here is really around the idea that, again, we want this to be a distributed capability that raises the bar for the whole organization. And so that doesn't mean we're going to focus only on PhD data scientists, right? Now, we need some of that skill set for sure, but we really want to look at our entire workforce. And so we have a kind of a dual approach. It's how do we upskill the current workforce? And we think that's going to be primarily through certificate-based ongoing continuing education programs as opposed to traditional degree granting programs, because it just moves too fast and there's too many people that we want to educate, and we want to be able to focus those learnings on areas that are going to be most applicable to their roles. So we've been partnering with organizations like SAS and local and state universities here in Ohio to help us develop programs. We're actually, right now we've rolled out the first of our analytics certificates that's educating our non-data scientists on how to apply these. And so we think of it as those practitioners. So we have analysts, quantitative analysts, and data scientists, and how do we differentiate those roles and what should we expect of each of them? And then the people that are going to leverage it and make a different decision, and what do they need to know? So they may not need to know how to write an algorithm, write the code, understand the math, but they need to know how to interpret the outcome of those things, and when is it appropriate to use the outcome of this kind of algorithm or this kind of methodology. And so our education is twofold that way, and we think that that's got to be a huge investment across the whole organization, like I said, to kind of raise the bar for the whole, for everybody's analytics capabilities. Again, it doesn't do us any good to deliver the best, AI methodologies in the world if nobody changes the way they make a decision with it in our organization.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So Chris, that is so true, right? I think you need to bring your employees along in the journey, and it doesn't matter what role they're playing, because AI is going to impact that accountant sitting in your finance department, or the recruiter sitting within HR, right? So I think it is important for everybody to have basic understanding of AI or AI literacy. But to this specific question, I'll say, yes, having a PhD in a machine learning or an AI space, having that expertise is absolutely important, but not for everybody who is using or consuming or around AI. I think the biggest myth that exists is that an AI team or a data science team is primarily made of PhDs in machine learning and AI, and everybody does, algorithm building. But that's not true. There are data engineers, there are product managers, there are designers, there are ML engineers who cut across software and data science. So there is an array of skill sets that exist within a data science team. So depending on where you want to go in your career, I think you have to choose that right MOOC that can help you move forward in your path.
And I would even say you have to think long term, like you're saying, it's not about all PhDs. It's also about capturing folks coming out of undergraduate mathematics, analytics, statistics programs, and building that skill set from the bottom up. And some set of them may eventually achieve a PhD in our organization, right? So it's also about building those pathways. And for us in healthcare, this is really important, because we found, 3 years ago when we went and talked to universities and talked to their analytics programs and said, how many of you are thinking about a career in healthcare that doesn't want to be a clinician? Almost nobody raised their hand, right? And so for us, it's really important to drive that awareness. And we have a pretty compelling story for a subset of those folks, right? Obviously, this is a highly competitive market right now for this talent. And where we can win that is on mission. So what are those talents and those skills that you're building? What are they going to be pointed at? And we believe our mission around healthcare is a powerful message for that subset. So we have to take that kind of full spectrum of approaches to build this capability here.
So Tim has a comment. He says, we need AI certifications, not certifications that are as tough as the bar or medical board exams, but a certification is in order. And he sees this as a huge opportunity and wonders, who's already doing this? Are there certification entities out there that are certifying for AI?
Certified for, do you think that means certified for AI, like the ability to create AI, or is he asking specifically around like some kind of healthcare or medical certification for the application of the methodologies?
Well, I don't know from his question, but so let me ask you, where do you see certifications as being important, and do those certification entities exist?
I think on the first side of that, they are emerging. There's lots of, certifications that you can get now in building, so that you can, in terms of the ability to build and do the work, right? So you can get certified in all kinds of different techniques. There's not really today a certification in the application of AI in healthcare, but I think that's where our internal certifications are supplementing this. So that gets back to helping our caregivers understand AI methodologies. And so we want a Cleveland Clinic certification, maybe in partnership with the university or with an external organization, that has a learning path that takes them to that point where we're comfortable that they understand, so that they can apply this stuff appropriately.
So Emerson has a question about, I'm shifting gears a little bit again, that AI within the analytics landscape tends to suggest that AI will become the de facto back office for decision support. And he would like to know whether you believe that that is accurate or not. Will AI become the de facto back office for decision support? Beena, you want to take that?
Yeah, I would say from the trends that we're seeing emerging, we do think that AI will be used in almost all decision support. From the trends, we're also seeing that human in the loop, or deferring the actual decision to humans, will be based on the criticality of the decision that's being made. I don't think you're going to, see AI just making all decisions without any human inputs. I think, as this landscape evolves, I think those nuances will come in, and you put in those triggers to make sure which are the decisions where humans are provided the data and the recommended decision, but they get that final say. And then there is the other case where the impact is not as high, or the risk is not as high, where AI will make the decision. But I do think AI will be used to arrive at that decision throughout the process.
Yeah, and the other area, and you'll hear about this as augmented analytics or augmented AI, is this idea not that it overtakes necessarily the decision support function, but that we can use artificial intelligence to help monitor and raise, for instance, trends, or just to be surveying the landscape and saying, here's something you might need to access. And the other way I think it enables back office without becoming the back office, quote unquote, is just allowing people to engage with their information in your own language. So I can say, what are the current sales trends? Are there any anomalies I should be aware of? What's sort of interest today? And again, this is applying artificial intelligence to, in some cases, supercharge BI or decision support, and in some cases, just making the accessibility and access and understandability of information better. So again, it doesn't supplant or replace decision support or the need for someone to make a decision. It just helps to raise up and highlight in a faster, more efficient and effective way the information that would factor into some of that work.
I think that's a great distinction, because I think the process of generating the alert or the information for the person who's going to make a decision is going to become automated. So today we might have an analyst or a person in the back office that's doing that work, right? That generates an alert for a clinician. I think that AI has the potential to automate the generation of those alerts, but it will be more about augmenting that decision maker's process. So I think if you parse that apart, that you're going to be, there's tremendous opportunity to automate all the stuff that goes into presenting the information to the people that are actually making the decision. But for us, at least in healthcare, we're probably always going to have that human in the loop, like Beena described, at least in the foreseeable future.
Chris, does that allow finer grained evaluation? So today we might say, a standard range for hemoglobin is 13 to 21. It's a pretty giant range. Well, I might be at the lower or the higher end. And so if someone's looking today and trying to do this very rapidly, and EMRs are not that useful, let's be honest, in how they still present information, I may now show up at the lower end of that range, but in fact, for me, that's low and it's a negative trend, because normally I run high. Do you think artificial intelligence and this augmentation allow us to be much more fine-tuned into personalized sort of trending and medicine? Because at the end of the day, that normal range is a statistical range, right? And none of us are statistics.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas that has the most opportunity in healthcare is that idea of personalized medicine. So can we understand for each individual patient, not just their clinical indications, but also their genetic influences and looking at their history and all those kinds of things to bring them together to say, and I think it's exactly what the example's a great one, that, each person's individual normal range can be tailored to that person. And eventually, even the treatments can be tailored. So today we have a lot of care paths and best practices, and we apply those broadly, using clinical research and best practices and evidence-based medicine. There is opportunity to tailor that to individual personalized care delivery as well. So I think that is the great promise that this holds in healthcare.
We have a couple of questions around the technology aspects of AI. And Arthur acknowledges that it's not all about the technology, but AI is a technology. And he's wondering, what is your view on creating a reliable, scalable platform in the cloud? How will the cloud contribute to AI as a tool to solve some of the many challenges in healthcare and other industries? Beena, you want to take that from the broader perspective first?
Yeah, sure. So I think the cloud revolution has been actually has been part of our lives for a bit now, and we are seeing AI definitely leveraging the cloud to get massive access to massive amount of data in, but also the compute power that it provides. So I do think it is going to evolve. The nuances there are more on public cloud versus private cloud versus a hybrid environment where you have on-prem versus cloud. So again, it depends on your use case and the security or privacy requirements around your data. That will drive the architecture that you choose, whether it's the hybrid one or on-prem or cloud. And I've certainly seen all these three models evolving. What I've also seen is, the whole revenue structuring around using these models, right? They'll start factoring into your architecture, being able to predict how much you'll end up paying for your cloud, which was a big unknown a couple of years ago, right? So I think we're going to see more and more of hybrid models evolving, leveraging cloud, but to develop AI.
Yeah, I think that's really just, I think that's well put. To me, the minute they took the server out from under my desk 20 years ago, it effectively was the cloud, right? So
Yeah.
I don't really know where it is. I don't care where the server sits. I think that these questions are going to really be around what capability can each of these options deliver at the best cost for our organization. So cloud offers things like elasticity and scalability and those kinds of things that are going to be important for certain use cases. And now I have that as an option for being able to deliver on that requirement for my organization. So I don't tend to think of cloud as like the only solution for AI. I think it is a delivery mechanism that we want to make sure we use in the most efficient manner and appropriate manner possible, right? To whatever problems it solves best, I want to use a cloud architecture for.
So we have time for one or two more questions. And this might be too long, but let me see if we can get through this. Tim asks, are we focusing too much on the algorithms? There are a lot of tools for building and testing models. Do you think more coordination is needed in organizations to plan and assess ROI ahead of model building? And then afterwards, maintenance and testing and auditing for various kinds of drift would cost how much in your view? So for instance, would it be 5 to 10 times more cost than building the model itself? I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at the part one, the ROI part. I think that in my experience, having worked in this space for a while, that is the most crucial. Irrespective of whether it's AI or any other technology, defining, having a sense of what's your ROI on this investment is super important to even get buy-in to get that project started, right? And AI is no different. So defining that is important. I think the other part beyond ROI is also thinking about the workforce impact, right? Whether it's a cultural change, how are you going to drive more adoption within your workforce? How are you going to upskill them? How, how are you going to enable your entire workforce to succeed with AI and the new solutions that you might be rolling out. The challenge is, even to think beyond it, as AI starts automating some of the tasks, right? What is that workforce that, to Chris's example, the back office analyst, right, who no longer has to look at this massive amounts of data and provide recommendation. What does that analyst's new role look like? And how do we as an organization train him or her to succeed in the future, right? There is another example, and Chris, I use this healthcare example, but there's also this notion that AI is going to augment humans with better decision-making power and free up time and space for humans to do something more creative, some additional research work potentially, or engage more with patients. But you also have to think about that next level of if it's a MRI machine operator or an X-ray operator, there are AI automates certain parts of it and helps you do your work faster, but there are only so many ways that a human can break bones. So the number of bone breakages that you need to evaluate is really, hopefully, not going to go up, right? So planning proactively, what are they going to do with that extra time, and communicating that, training your workforce? I think those are as important as defining the ROI.
Yeah, one of the things with technology, so there's been a number of studies to answer the question of what is the cost to maintain. So I think with artificial intelligence, we have to consider that these things never come out of development, right? So people have said sort of development starts when you go live, because the systems are learning from everything, and it's not just the data and the rules, but it's the environment. They only know what they were trained on, and they will only behave well in those circumstances, and whether they behave well then depends on what they were trained on, is really what you thought you were doing, right? We're really only predicting history in a lot of ways, but also, do people actually engage with that properly? So, some recent research I think I saw from Andrew Ng was that you can assume that the cost of maintaining and operating the system is 10 times the cost to develop it. And I think the other component here is we need to take more of a portfolio management type approach as we look at developing and evaluating the cost and ROI for these things, because some of the early work is going to be experimental. It's going to build some of the foundational glue and infrastructure required around your data engineering pipelines and developing some of those patterns. So it's better to look at it and evaluate it as a portfolio with different levels of risk and a longitudinal view of when value gets delivered, because some of those bets are going to pay off and some of those won't, and also the initial investment then gets attributed to long-term value. And so when we talk to organizations really across industries, that is one of the things that's come through really loud and clear, which is if you want to value this, and in our first strategy guide, which was picking the right problems to solve, there's a good example of portfolio management as well.
Terrific. Well, we are just about out of time, so thank you so much, Kimberly, Beena, and Chris. A really interesting session. And again, thank you in the audience for your terrific questions. We got to about, I think, a quarter of them, if that. And a final thank you to SAS for sponsoring this excellent series on adopting AI. Have a great day.